Okay, we'll start with this. The two hard-punching light heavyweights, Artur Beterbiev, the champion, and Anthony Yarde, the challenger, are all weighed in and ready to go. Seems like when the fight was first announced, most people naturally went with Artur Beterbiev given his reputation, his unblemished record, and his KO percentage. 100% knockout percentage, but that perception over time has waned a bit. Now people are looking at this fight as being a bit closer than they might have initially, because Anthony Yarde, he's a hard puncher. He's a lot younger than Artur. In some ways fresher than Artur, even if he has suffered 2 professional losses, and one of those losses was a knockout loss to then-champion Sergey Vodkalev. Anthony Yarde is still perceived as being a younger, fresher fighter than Artur because he's not as injury-prone as Artur. Artur, who sports a professional record of 18 wins, no losses, no draws, 18 knockouts. 18 wins, 18 knockouts, 38 years old. To Anthony Yarde, who's about 7 years younger, give or take, sporting a professional record of 23 wins, 2 losses, no draws, 22 knockouts. 22 out of 23 of Anthony's wins have come by way of knockout, though due to the quality of competition between the fighters, that Artur's is noticeably better than Anthony's. Artur is perceived as being the bigger puncher of the two. He's not just the bigger puncher. It's not the matchmaking. He is the bigger puncher. Having knocked out then unbeaten WBC, Ring Magazine, and Lineal champion Alexander Vozdik. Very durable Joe Smith Jr., WBO champion from Long Island. And U.S. Olympian Marcus Brown. These are more experienced and educated boxers, more educated and experienced at least than Anthony Yarde, who doesn't come from some deep amateur background. And he's never been a champion himself. I think the very best win on Anthony Yarde's resume so far is his win over then unbeaten Lyndon Arthur, but it's a win he only amassed after Lyndon already beat him by way of a points decision and a judicious jab. Lyndon won the first fight and Anthony won the second. Won the second by way of knockout. On paper, Artur Beterbiev is head and shoulders above Anthony Yarde. On paper, he is. But you know what they say about boxing? There's more to boxing than what you see on paper. There is a feeling that Anthony may be catching Artur at the right time, the most opportune time, due to the discrepancy in the fighters' ages. The fact that Artur is 38 to Anthony, who's 31, and Artur, he does seem more injury-prone than Anthony. Could Father Time finally catch up to the beast from the east? The one who only saw action once last year in June. In truth, both boys only saw action once last year. Neither man has been all that active in the last 12 months. Anthony Yarde shared the ring with a very pedestrian Koikov late last year in November, and a few months before that, Artur Beterbiev was in action against his fellow champion, Joe Smith Jr., in June. Both bouts ended by way of knockout before the half. You have to agree that Joe Smith Jr. is a cut above a guy like Koikov. He is. A few nuances and discrepancies aside, it is established that both Artur Beterbiev and Anthony Yarde, respectively, they're both punchers and they both can't afford to let the other man get off. In that way, it doesn't really behoove either man to get into very many exchanges with the other. Gotta remember, Artur Beterbiev, he got dropped in the heat of the exchange opposite the ring, Callum Johnson. In the heat of the exchange, both men are vulnerable and it's anybody's fight. Either man could end up hurting either man. I want to say that the edge in power has to go to Artur Beterbiev, but the edge and speed, that's got to go to Anthony. Punches do seem snappier than Artur's, even if they're not as heavy as Artur's. So I think the saving grace for Artur Beterbiev in this match is that in spite of Anthony Yarde having good hand speed and good counters, Artur Beterbiev's punches are actually very short. They don't seem to travel from very far in spite of there being a whole lot on them. And because they don't have to travel very far to get to the target, the window of opportunity to counter them is a very short window. He's got that working for him, even if he doesn't appear to be as quick as Anthony Yarde is. Anthony, who I don't think is going to try his luck and hit the gas the same way that Joe Smith Jr. did before him. I don't think he's going to be the aggressor. I think he's going to be the defender and look to land a big counter to get Artur out of there. Anthony's got a good jab. Fighting out of a shell guard, Anthony Yarde exhibits a good jab upstairs, good jab to the body, but we have seen in previous instances that Artur Beterbiev can effectively counter a jab, a good jab, a judicious one, with a big right hand over the top or a right hand to the body. body under the jab by slipping.
Slip and counter.
Because both boys have a reputation for being big punchers, I expect the early goings of the match to be very cat and mouse.
I expect that Artur Beterbiev's going to double and triple up on his jab and look to chip away at Anthony Yarde. Break him down gradually.
And because he's more experienced as both an amateur and a professional, I believe that Artur understands distance a bit better than Anthony Yarde does, especially since Anthony...
Most of the success he's had has been against pedestrian-level opponents. 2 times he stepped up, he paid for it.
Kovalev fight, the first Lyndon Arthur fight. I mean, he's a live dog in this thing. He really is, and you shouldn't look past him. But if history is any indicator of things to come, both times Anthony Yarde stepped up, he got shut down.
Artur's craftier than he's given credit for. He's known as a bruiser, but
he can box and apply educated pressure. The longer the fight goes on, the more it actually favors Artur, because
Anthony's not used to swimming in deep waters. You remember what happened in the Kovalev fight? He gassed out, got taken out by a jab.
So the longer the fight goes on, the more it favors Artur. In the early goings of the fight, that's when Anthony Yarde will be most dangerous, while he's still fresh. But as the fight progresses...
tilts the scales towards the champion.
In terms of shot selection and nuance, I actually give that edge to Artur Beterbiev.
Not as basic, not as textbook as what you get from Anthony.
There isn't actually a whole lot I think Anthony does better than Artur Beterbiev. All he's really got working for him is that he's younger, not as injury prone, and he's a little bit quick.
Quick enough to get a hard counter, but do I think that's going to secure him the victory tomorrow?
No.
No, I don't.
Artur Beterbiev actually has a really good corner in Mark Ramsey, and I think Mark Ramsey, in preparing Artur, the game plan for this fight...
They know they're in there with a puncher, so the plan can't be to just go gung-ho and take the guy out early. I think they plan on dragging this out and chipping away at Anthony Yarde round by round to take him out after the half.
After his energy reserves are a little bit more depleted and after a couple of heavy shots have already landed. I'm going with Artur Beterbiev to win this fight after the half in, say, 7 or 8 rounds.
If the knockout comes, it comes, but I don't think they're going in there looking for an early knockout per se. I think they understand they need to give Anthony a certain level of respect.
Think Artur's going to wear him down? Then wear him out.
I think Artur's going to stop him.
And if he does, he will advance ahead of Errol Spence Jr., having been more active in the last 2 years at least than Errol has been. They're both in possession of 3 alphabet titles apiece, but Artur's on a busier schedule than Errol is.
Errol Spence Jr. has only fought once in the last 2 years.
Artur fought 2 times in 2021 and at least once last year. Errol didn't fight at all in the year of 2021, and he only fought once last year.
Sparse schedule activity like that, it's not because you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, let me tell you. Now, if Anthony Yarde wins the fight tomorrow, if he upsets the apple cart, Artur's off the list, and Anthony will come in the number 10 spot behind Devine Haney.
Per the rules that govern the list, in defeating a pound-for-pound fighter, you become one yourself. But because that will have been the only champion that Anthony Yarde's ever beaten,
him and Devin will be 1-1 with each other in terms of championship scalps, but Devin's undisputed, whereas Anthony, he'd just be unified.
That's in the event that Anthony Yarde wins. I don't think he will. I think Artur's going to stop him. Beyond that fight, Beterbiev versus Bivol, that fight, that could end up being pushed back to 2024, says Bob Arum.
Yeah, I think so. But we gotta be realistic. I think Bivol is looking first to fight Canelo Alvarez. A much bigger financial fight for him. So if that fight happens, Bivol and Beterbiev won't be until next year.
That doesn't have to be the situation. That doesn't have to be the case. Eddie Hearn is in the process of attempting to make a Bivol versus Buatsi fight that I think most people would favor Dmitry Bivol to win in that way. Both him and the winner of this fight, provided it's Artur, they'd be on the same schedule, and you could do the fight between them in either the summer or fall months.
That's if Artur wins. If Anthony Yarde wins, I don't think Frank is going to be as receptive to that fight as Bob Arum claims to be.
If for some reason Canelo Alvarez changes his mind and decides to pursue other bouts, Arum would be willing to schedule Bivol and Beterbiev for the tail end of the year.
If the Canelo fight doesn't happen, then maybe we can do Beterbiev and Bivol this year.
Said it before and I'll say it again. I'm not keen on seeing Canelo versus Bivol too.
Been there and done that. I'd rather see Bivol versus Beterbiev. That's the only fight to make at 175.
Bob Arum is already disclosing his requisites for such a fight, stating if Hearn is willing to do Beterbiev versus Bivol on ESPN, we'll do it anytime, any place.
What did I tell you? What have I been telling you? The only way it goes down is if Eddie is willing to send over Dmitry, because Bob's not willing to send over Artur, even though he should.
If he wins tomorrow, what the hell else have you got lined up for that guy?
We'd love to do that fight, but obviously it would have to be on ESPN. We could work something out with DAZN in certain areas, but in the United States and Canada, it would have to be on the ESPN platform. If Hearn is willing to do that, then we're happy to do the fight anytime, any place. We're not gonna do it in Russia.
Well, I don't think anybody wants to do it in Russia, neither Bob Arum or Eddie Hearn. The real question here is, if Bivol becomes available in the next few months, and Artur is available, he's not otherwise tied up with anything, it behooves you to make this fight for your fighter now!
If he wins tomorrow, you can't afford to wait. You can't sit on your hands.
Artur Beterbiev is 38 going on 39 years old. He doesn't have the luxury of time, and you can't provide him with the luxury of choice. If you don't do this fight with Dmitry and him, what are your alternatives?
Bob's making this a platform thing, as I expected.
If it's on ESPN, there would be a huge audience, maybe 2 million homes, and people wouldn't have to pay extra to watch it because it wouldn't be on ESPN Plus. It would be on ESPN.
Did he do 2 million homes when he put Artur Beterbiev in there with Alexander Vozdik?
2 million homes with Joe Smith Jr. Were those the viewing figures for that fight? And what about tomorrow's fight? What's that fight gonna do?
It's not going to do 2 million homes, and pardon me for saying so. Excellent matchup that this might be. Dmitry Bivol versus Artur Beterbiev in America. I don't think that does 2 million homes. I don't. Not two Russian nationals.
Now, perhaps a little over 1 million. Maybe 1.5, but not 2 million.
And you see what the focus of Bob Arum's efforts are. Delivering those viewing figures to his broadcast partner. That's what he's focused on.
But is delivering for his broadcast partner the same as delivering for his fighter? Delivering for Artur Beterbiev? Does Artur make more money from that fight on ESPN than what he can make having that same fight with that same fighter on DAZN?
Where does Artur stand to make the most money? What's best for Artur?
I think if Bivol pushes Hearn, Vadim Kornilov, a good guy who's Bivol's manager, pushes Hearn, you know, it'll happen. If they don't push Hearn, it won't happen.
Does that logic also work in reverse? If Artur Beterbiev pushes his people, does the fight happen? I mean, what about Artur pushing for the fight? What about Artur pushing you?
The same way you want Dmitry Bivol to push Hearn.
Does the same apply?
Artur Beterbiev looks like he's impregnable. I've been shocked with Beterbiev. Guys can hit him, and it doesn't seem to affect him. He always seems to find a way to knock somebody out. To me, his knockout win against former WBC champion Alexander Vozdik in October of 2019 showed that he's a terrific fighter who's going to be very, very tough to beat. And he handled Joe Smith like it was a piece of cake. A second-round technical knockout last June 18th. So Beterbiev is a real talent. I've never seen a light heavyweight hit as hard as Beterbiev.
And he does hit hard. And power, as they say, power's the last thing to go. But a fighter's legs and a fighter's reflexes, his response time, I mean, Artur Beterbiev, great fighter that he might be, even if he wins tomorrow, he doesn't have the luxury of time, and staying on ESPN, he really doesn't have the luxury of choice.
What do you think? He should shoot for undisputed or just keep fighting mandatories well into his 40s?
What's the plan, Bob? Callum Smith fight? Callum Smith's a matchroom fighter. What's the plan? Wait around for the winner of Pascal versus Eifert, his IBF mandatory challenger?
Your fight is 38 going on 39 years old, and what you're talking about is pushing back the Bivol fight well into next year at the start of this year. This is what you're saying.
How does Artur Beterbiev's management feel about all of this? Because he won't make the money with Callum Smith or the winner of Pascal versus Eifert that he could be making opposite the ring, Dmitry Bivol, whether it's on ESPN or DAZN. That's the biggest money fight for a 38-year-old light heavyweight champion who ain't getting any younger. So if he has to cross over to DAZN in order to get it...
What are you saying? You're saying that's non-negotiable?
Eddie Hearn
was willing to send over his super featherweight and Alicia Baumgartner so that your fighter, your champion, could unify titles. Why don't you return the favor?
It's not like you're making a killing, a big financial killing off of Artur Beterbiev fights. You're not.
And what portion of this boils down to choice? The decision-making of Artur and his management and his team. Are they willing to cross over if the rewards are greater on DAZN than they are at ESPN?
What's Artur Beterbiev's team saying? We know what Dmitry Bivol's team is saying per a tweet from Steve Kim. Here's what Vadim Kornilov, the manager of Dmitry Bivol, on the network roadblocks that exist with a showdown with Artur Beterbiev, had to say about it. I believe we should have an open and more structured conversation about all the material points on this fight. Bivol has been with DAZN for a long time, and Beterbiev has been with ESPN for some time. We are open to do the fight anytime, any place, period.
Artur Beterbiev's team, his management, should want to get Dmitry Bivol in the ring before a second Canelo Alvarez fight happens.
They should, because that takes out the competition. If Canelo Alvarez plans on taking another trip to the light heavyweight division, the man to see, the man to beat, would be Artur Beterbiev.
In that scenario.
Beyond this weekend's fight, if Artur Beterbiev wins, there's still time, because Canelo versus Bivol 2 isn't Canelo Alvarez's next fight. He's supposed to be fighting John Ryder. Anything to do with Dmitry Bivol would take place later on in the year, so while he's free and you can negotiate, you should negotiate.
Unless you want to keep fighting mandatory challenges well into your 40s.
Because those are his options. Dmitry Bivol's options are very different from Artur's. He already made good money opposite the ring Canelo Alvarez. He can do it again. He has that option. And a potential Joshua Buatsi fight.
But what are Artur's options if they don't do the Bivol fight? What's he got lined up? Potential fight with Callum Smith, the matchroom fighter?
The only matchroom fighter you should be trying to fight right now is Dmitry Bivol. More so, at least, than Callum Smith.
And if you're willing to fight Dmitry Bivol, you can circumvent Callum Smith. Put him on the back burner.
Fighting him's not more important than fighting Dmitry Bivol, and fighting him won't get you more money than fighting Dmitry Bivol, so let's just cut the fucking crap.
Can we stop this? Can we fucking stop this?
Let's stop pretending that Artur, if he wins this weekend, let's stop pretending he has better options than Dmitry does if he doesn't fight Dmitry. Because he doesn't.
Right?